masked guys in vans pulling abuela off the street. I don't think it does a lot of good, but normies look at liberal white women and go, what? Like, how entitled do you have to be to think that you're not putting yourself in danger in this situation, or that you can just behave like this and there won't be any consequences for that? Feminists are full of shit. They do not care about women at all. It's so inverted. You don't care about Iran. You didn't care about October 7th, any of the women. In fact, after saying that like so much of a whisper the wrong way could get someone Me Too'd, you are all demanding video proof of these women being murdered by people who bragged about murdering them.
Sadly, those of us who live outside the US don't enjoy the protections of the First Amendment. Governments in the UK, Australia, and Canada, as well as the EU, are censoring online speech like no one's business. Thankfully, there's a really simple way to get around all this, and that's with the help of our friends at Private Internet Access, or PIA for short. PIA is the VPN I use and trust. In case you don't know, a VPN, or virtual private network, is an app that hides your IP address and safeguards your internet connection through an encrypted tunnel. Whenever you are browsing online on an unprotected device, your device is transmitting a lot of information out into the open, which can be seen by multiple parties before it reaches the website you're trying to visit. Instead of giving away your personal information and location to the world, PIA lets you change your IP address to one of 91 countries. That means you can gain access to websites and services that are only available in those locations. And it's not just that. Did you know that streaming services like Netflix and Prime Video have huge catalogs of content, but you can only access a fraction of it from your own country? Using PIA to change your location opens up a whole new world of streaming. I love it. Paying for Netflix without using PIA is a bit like paying for front row seats at the cinema but being forced to sit in the hallway. I also use it all the time when I'm traveling to catch up with what's going on at home. Because PIA is available for all platforms, I never need to worry about my safety or my privacy. It works on Windows, Apple Macs, iPhones, Androids, and more. Even better, you only need one subscription to protect yourself across all the devices you own. So sign up now to the world's most transparent VPN provider and take advantage of our special offer. Viewers of my show can get 86% off a subscription to Private Internet Access. So that's just £1.67 a month. And you also get an extra 4 months thrown in completely for free. To take advantage of this incredible deal, just go to piavpn.com/Brendan. That's piavpn.com/Brendan. Signing up is totally risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee and 24/7 customer support. You won't regret it. Sign up now at piavpn.com/Brendan. Hello, welcome back to the Brendan O'Neill Show with me, Brendan O'Neill, and my special guest this week, Bridget Phetasy. Bridget, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me back. Always a pleasure. You're one of the few podcasts I am saying yes to while I'm writing a book. So because you always help me clarify my thinking a bit. That's the only person I'll say yes to for a podcast.
I am so flattered, and same with you. I love talking to you. It's like whenever I find myself thinking, what the fuck is going on in America? I think I better speak to Bridget. She'll tell me. She'll put us straight. And I've got that feeling at the moment, and I know that you're thinking, what the hell is going on in Europe? So we can talk a bit about that as well. But what's going on in America? Is it all good? Is it as crazy as it looks to us outsiders? What's it
Tell
like?
me how it looks to you outside first, because I'm interested at the external perception of things.
Well, to me, it looks a bit like Trump derangement syndrome. Having been hibernating for a bit, it seems like it's coming back. There's a lot of kind of street protests. It's slightly reminiscent of 2020, BLM and all that, but not quite as bad as that, obviously. But it does seem like it's getting rowdy on the streets in Minnesota, the protests taking place in other parts of the country as well, the anti-ICE stuff. There were a couple of times I was reading the press and watching the news about America, especially Minnesota, and I thought, hold on, is this a low-level civil war going on here? What's happening in this part of the country? What's it like as an observer in the US? Does it feel like that as well?
Not really. I mean, it's weird. I really realize that I use my show Dumpster Fire to try and make sense of a lot of the news, and not always perfectly. That the Renee Good thing is, I mean, a lot of things. One, it's an election year. And we were joking about this on Dumpster Fire. I always forget that now Democrats love to just wild out. The activist class gets rowdy when it's an election year in America. And there is this sense of like, nice country you have here. Would be ashamed if something happened to it. Trump won. He acts like he has a mandate, but there was still a big portion of America that does not like Trump and did not vote for him. You're right. I think a lot of that has been in hibernation, and now it's kind of awakening a bit, and also in time for an election year.
Yeah.
The ICE stuff has been very interesting to follow because I have been talking about the optics of it, and I'm not sure that like masked guys in vans pulling abuela off the street into unmarked cars is not. I don't think it does a lot of good, but there's a lot of complicated things that seem to underpin what is happening there, and that you have upwards of 20 million illegal immigrants in the United States. This was done in a previous administration. How do you get rid of illegal immigrants that are embedded in your country? That's not something that I have any idea how you would do. And then you have sanctuary states, Minneapolis being one of them, where local law enforcement is not cooperating with federal law enforcement. So instead of picking up these child rapists or whoever they're going after in some of these instances, and because they're starting with just trying to get rid of all of the illegal immigrant criminals, and instead of arresting these people and handing them over to ICE, they're oftentimes letting local law enforcement, letting them go back into the communities, which then forces ICE into these situations where optically it looks horrible, but they're having to go to homes and they're having to go to wherever they're trying to pick these people up. So you're not really seeing this kind of conflict in red states because local law enforcement is cooperating with ICE. Whereas in blue states, sanctuary cities, you are seeing a lot more of this overt conflict because the local law enforcement is not just, they're in conflict with the federal law enforcement, and then that emboldens the citizens to kind of take matters into their own hands as well. You also have, the reason you say this is like George Floyd, but it's not really, like, their heart really isn't in it. You're seeing kind of this, it's like the revolt of the liberal white woman in many respects. And that's, I think, again, where it feels different as someone in America. These are people who, from, again, oftentimes it feels like when I'm viewing the news, it is, as the late Scott Adams used to say, "To America's one screen." So you have people who truly believe this is a fascist, white supremacist, uh, leader and an administration, and this is their Gestapo working on the streets to take these people off the streets, and they've believed this for 10 years. And it has only gotten worse. And I always think about, how much of this stuff becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You believe that this is true, you start behaving as if this is true, as if you're fighting the Gestapo in a weird way though, where you actually, like, if you're thinking this is like you're in Iran and you're fighting these like this is a group of men that are going around and they're just shooting anybody who's gonna confront them, then you would think there would be some sense of danger, although these women don't seem to have any real sense of fear or danger when they're confronting these people, because in many instances, the permission structure for a lot of this has been established, particularly since 2020 from George Floyd. So it does feel like it's downstream, but it doesn't seem like, um, I mean, the first time I feel like I even saw any people of color protesting on behalf of Renee Good was at this church that they invaded with Don Lemon over the past weekend. But up until that point, it was very much like this kind of liberal, they're calling them wine moms, as the people who are heading these protests. And it's not like you see it kind of pop up some places, but it's certainly not, it doesn't feel like 2020 at all to me. It feels more like a sad 2020.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a very good description. That's a very good opening actually to some of the things I wanted to ask you about. And I did want to ask you what's going on with white women, or rather what's going on with liberal white women. I've seen you talking about it on your podcast, and it's an interesting question. And I don't want to diss Renee Good. I think what happened there was a real tragedy. I didn't like some of the right's response to it, where they seemed to be saying similar things about Renee Good that the left said about Charlie Kirk. And I just thought, God, are both sides as bad as each other when someone gets killed? But I guess to kick off, even though it's a horrible topic, I did want to get your thoughts because I'm just interested to know what Bridget Phetasy thinks on this question about the killing itself. So many people have fallen into line, some saying this was a crime, it was outrageous, there was no justification for it whatsoever, and then of course other people saying it was fine. She was about to kill him with her car. He had no choice but to stop her. Have you come to a decision on that, or are you still waiting for further information?
I mean, I would like more information. I think everybody line not here is the difference. I don't think everybody lines up. I actually do think that the left lines up immediately, but on the right, sure, you have the people who are immediately yelling domestic terrorists, and that's really no better than the other side, or cheering for it, although I don't think that that's the majority. I did see in the right-wing media people that I respect and follow and, have come to see are the most somewhat sane over the past decade, they immediately say, "Well, let's get more information and let's see." So they're just trying to get to the truth of the situation. What I can't stand is context getting stripped of this situation when people are talking about it, as if this was just a Gestapo who committed some state execution, and this woman was just an innocent protester with her dog, and that's then all context is stripped of how this woman even ended up in this position. What are and this was kind of my take was like, aside from I can't get into the weeds of what I think about this because I don't know what one would do in that situation, and I don't really know, like, does she deserve to die for protesting? No. Obviously, I think any reasonable person would come to that conclusion, but also reasonable people would say, "What the heck were you doing in that situation? Why would you put yourself in that situation?" And you weren't just some innocent protester exercising your First Amendment rights. You were also in a car trying to obstruct federal officers, and more information comes out that you were following them around with your girlfriend and filming them. So, as more of this stuff, the context that gets stripped from a lot of the way that it's framed, particularly in the left wing here, yeah, then it looks really bad. It looks like, oh, this woman was just trying to get out of the way and then she died. Did he need to shoot her? I don't think need is like the right word. I think obviously a lot of stuff, there's going to be a trial about this. Like, we're going to find out a lot more information. And I don't think that I generally wait to try and find that out. My question is like, what m- in I try to put myself in the mind of a person who has, as somebody who was a kid, what would override my self-preservation? The feeling that, well, I have this kid, the father's dead, I'm their only parent. What would possibly override that being my priority? And all I can think is that you are captured by an ideology. You truly believe that this is, um, like the next Hitler. Trump is literally Hitler. This is something that they often repeat and believe, and or you're in a cult. Or you're just crazy, or is it like you don't have any inherent sense of danger anymore because you haven't really suffered any consequences for mouthing off or being like, we saw this in 2020. You could throw water bottles at cops, people were spitting on them. There is, and this is something that is very frustrating as someone who's observed the culture wars now for longer than I would have ever expected in my life and commented on them. There is one side in America that is constantly exercising an enormous amount of
Yeah.
self-restraint in the face of constantly being goaded. Just constantly having people being like, "Hey, we're gonna come into your church," in a city where there was a shooting in a church 5 months ago and 2 kids died. And you're just gonna keep on pushing and keep on pushing, and I was talking to Michael Young, Local Distance, about this, and we were talking about this on Dumpster Fire. This is actually in a lot of Marxist tactic books. It's not the action, it's the reaction that they're trying to get out of you for the optics, and so a lot of this stuff, feels very frustrating. And even as somebody who in my youth really bought into a lot of the one-sided propaganda, like hands up, don't shoot. I took that as gospel, and it's not true. Like, the whole thing isn't true, and I never had I stayed in the left-wing media ecosystem for the entirety of my life, I don't know that I would know that that has been debunked and is not true. I would
Yeah.
still believe that.
Yeah, it's so not true. Hands up, don't shoot. It's not true in the US, but it's even less true in Britain, where unbelievably that slogan, hands up, don't shoot, became popular here after the George Floyd killing, and our cops don't even have guns. It was so bizarre to see kids. It's like, what are you playing at? But yeah, I think that point about provocation is really important and well put, because I always remember when the protesters during the BLM era would scream at diners who were just eating their dinner on the side, al fresco or having a drink, and they would scream at them saying, "Say Black Lives Matter or else we're gonna shove you around." You saw so much of that, and in fact, you saw it again after 7th of October, where people would get on the subway in New York City and said, "Are there any Zionists here?" Or they would turn up at people's houses or at people's synagogues, and they're still doing that, and really provoke, provoke, provoke. And the patience of people who don't respond to that, and the patience of police who don't react when someone is screaming fascist in their face morning, noon, and night. I mean, that deserves a medal in and of itself. But you talk about how, what would drive someone like Renee Good and all the other, um, lots of liberal white women who are doing this, and you say it's that kind of ideological thing. What's going on with these kind of women? Is there an ideological capture? Do they really think they're on the side of right when they do this stuff? Is that
Yeah.
what they're thinking on the streets?
Yeah, they do, definitely. They definitely think that there's like a weird that kind of weird inherent racism that you saw where it is speaking on behalf of other people that might, and it was so funny. I was saying like the X algorithm is so crazy now. If you stop and play one video or like one thing, it will just give you a million more of that. And in the wake of this, it was all I saw one video of a black man commenting, and he was like, girl, what are you doing? Because we were like, it was, if you really purport to understand the Black struggle in America, you would know you shouldn't be not listening to law enforcement when they tell you to put your hands up and get outside of your car. Get out of your car. You don't keep driving. Now, again, there is a lot of different perspectives. Some people say she was being given different directions by different ICE agents. Now, all of that will come to light, but in my own experience, you just listen to what they say, and generally the last thing you do is move your car if there are
Yeah.
police around it in any way, shape, or form. Even if you're getting conflicting instructions, you would know to just put your hands up and not do anything. That should just be. And I was a bad kid who did a lot of drugs, so I had a lot more interactions with police and like, that's when people call me a bootlegger, I'm like, I'm fucking terrified of the cops. I know the kinds of personalities that join law enforcement. We have seen plenty of corruption. We know they have a lot of problems with domestic abuse. It's not like I'm saying these are perfect people, although I also have no idea how they do their job. You are exposed to the scum of the earth all day long. Every single interaction could be life or death, and you have to also approach every single interaction as if you don't have all of this other information available to you that you have available to you. Every person is kind of this like, "Oh, well, we'll approach this as if they're innocent before I assume they're guilty, even though this piece of shit is probably guilty." It's like, how I don't even know how they do that job in their mind. So we like to like strip all of this away when we're talking about cops and whatnot. But I do think just from a basic, I always try to come to just basic, like normie common sense. And I think most normies look at liberal white women and go, what, how entitled do you have to be to think that you're not putting yourself in danger in this situation, or that that you can just behave like this and there won't be any consequences for that. I don't fully understand it because if you really believe that this is Hitler and you believe that these people are like the SS, and then you would assume that you are going to get killed every time you even go try and interact with them, or you would assume that there would be very harsh consequences like they do in Iran every time they take the streets there. But they don't seem to have that. They don't seem to have that, and in fact, they will provoke these people in ways that you're like, "So, which which is it?"
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there were many people provoking Hitler's thugs.
No. I don't think the cops are the Gestapo or the SS, and even I wouldn't provoke them. So
Yeah.
it's so illogical, the kind of arguments they make. Listening to you there did remind me of some of the events of 2020, the crazy summer of 2020. I find myself having more and more conversations about that summer because I think the ripples from it are still being felt across not just America, but the Western world. Um, but it's like, I remember there was footage of some scenes of disturbances in the US, and there would be, a black business owner or a black grandmother saying to a bunch of kids, many of them white, saying, "Please stop destroying stuff. Please just go away. Stop throwing petrol bombs. Stop burning down buildings." And it was so interesting to see that clash between two different worldviews. But I wonder to what extent these liberal white women who are kind of doing, being unnecessarily confrontational with ICE agents who are trying to do a difficult job, is it stirred up by the mainstream? I mean, I've seen Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, and Jacob Frey, mayor of Minneapolis, who said to ICE agents, "Get the F out of our state." The media in the US and even the media here in the UK seem obsessed with ICE, and the liberal media, I mean, they seem obsessed that ICE is this most problematic organization in the world, really evil, etc. Does that kind of mainstream approach feed into the slightly erratic behavior of these protesters?
I mean, of course it does, and I think it is, if you believe that Trump is Hitler, then this would be the thing to do, and, this would, and again, the people who are kind of stirring this up, they have lists of these ICE agents, and they have and again, I'm of two minds about a lot of these things. Like, I'll say, I don't think it's great that you have masked agents running around trying to grab people and throwing them in vans. But then again, you find out who one of these guys is, now he and his entire extended family and children are in danger because he's been doxxed, and all of these people are now everyone in his life is in danger because he's doing a job for the government. So I kind of get the masks in this instance. And then I don't like the where are your papers running around in a free country asking people where their papers are. But then, like, how do we figure out who's here legally and who's not? There's so many people, and again, stripped of context, everybody, and I guess it's because liberals are fundamentally just cool with the fact that 20 million people were allowed to come into America illegally, and many of them were criminals, a large number. Many of them weren't. But how I don't know how you, like, undo that, omelet now that you've and honestly, my husband and I were talking about this. We were like, "Honestly, it's kinda shocking this hasn't happened before." Given how many people they've been going after and how long they've been at this, and ICE has been around for a while. This is the other thing that people constantly bring up. When Obama was in charge and ICE was going around trying to get rid of illegal immigrants, or even if it was for a photo op because they were being criticized about immigration, they were like, the press was riding around with them, and it was fine. And now suddenly they're the Gestapo. So the way that they're viewed has changed, and I think a lot of their tactics have changed, and I'm sure that some of this is to try and scare people from even coming into America, but so some of it I don't yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I've seen from them that I strongly disagree with, and yet I have no idea how you embark on trying to round up criminals who are gonna there was a shooting of 2 right after Renee Good, and we were about to go to, like, launch our dumpster fire that was called LARP Round and Find Out, and then I was like, "Oh, shit, there's another one, hold on." And everyone was like, "Oh, is it bad?" And I'm like, "Well, there's no media on it, so I'm assuming no." Which is sad that I can know that it doesn't fit the right narrative because it's not getting any coverage. So immediately you find out that it was 2 gang members and that they shot at them. And there's plenty of instances like that where you're trying to get rid of child rapists, gang members, really violent criminals who were let out of prisons and came into America, and they will shoot at law enforcement and get killed or arrested, and that doesn't get any coverage. At least in the left, there's no like, it's so hard to find balance. It'll get coverage in the right, but they won't cover the excess or abuses of ICE. And the left will focus on the excesses and abuses, but they won't focus on the fact that they actually are getting rid of some very, very, very bad guys who have been let into the country. And there is the feeling of anger that I believe is understandable from parents of kids, daughters who were raped and murdered by illegal immigrants, where they go, "So you're marching for Renee Good, but you didn't march for my daughter." Like, where was your compassion then? Why didn't you care at all that this young girl was raped and murdered and thrown over a bridge? That's understandable. Then you go, "Oh, well, this is just political. This actually has nothing to do with your compassion for people. It just has to do with your politics."
Yeah, we've had an incredibly similar situation here where lots of working class women have taken to the streets over the past year protesting against illegal immigration and migrant hotels where illegal migrants get put up at our expense because some of these illegal immigrants have committed sexual crimes, they've abused women, they've abused girls. But it's the women marching against that who get called fascist scum because
Yep.
they're anti-immigration, supposedly, whereas the immigrants are defended. You know, refugees welcome here, they chant, and they condemn the women who only want safety for their daughters. So it's a really screwed up situation here as well. I wanted to ask you if there's a class element to some of this, or you know, I guess the two Americas, one screen thing, how that plays out, because it's my understanding that um, Trump voters you know, want something to be done about porous borders and the fact that so many immigrants came in illegally. So they want this to be fixed. Whereas it does tend to be amongst the kind of credentialed classes. I'm not sure that Rene Good falls into that category, but amongst the credentialed classes where it's very much pro-immigration, post-borders, you know, chill out, what's the problem? And we see a similar thing in the UK where opinion polls frequently find that working class voters are more concerned about illegal immigration than kind of upper class voters. Is that a dynamic here? Is it still the case that Trump's support base wants something to be done about this, even if they might be a bit cagey about some ICE tactics?
Oh, yeah, I mean, even polling, I believe, that came out yesterday, they were kind of baffled that there's still a high percentage of support for for what they've done with the border. You know, we're a year in now, and people are roundly supportive that the border has essentially been shut, and they're even in the wake of Renee Good, which I think a lot of normal people have complex feelings about, still feel like they support getting rid of criminals who were let into the United States. That isn't something that is that and I would say, you know, I guess the class thing is interesting because I don't even know if it's class so much as education. I feel like it's very much the, like, academic, you know, educated liberal class. I know a lot of really wealthy people who are behind the immigration that who support what's happening in terms of immigration laws getting tougher and the borders being not open, wide open, and the ICE stuff. Y you've and I know a lot of poor people who do too. You know, there's I actually the people who seem the most against it is like a very specific kind of, um, college educated, liberal. I do more and more believe that the media silo that liberals are in is actually much more, um it's just much more insulated than anybody else. Because it still is the mainstream. It still is the dominant even the way the New York Times framed this storming of the church the other day, the way that that was framed is so you're like, "Oh," and this is it's still mainstream, so you're still exposed to it if you're someone who takes in independent media or someone who takes in even if you're, like, only on a diet of right-wing media, you still see it, comes through your phone on your in your news, like, you're still exposed to the way these things are framed on the left. I don't think they're exposed to it at all. If all of you do is just take that as gospel, watch MSNBC and CNN, read the New York Times, you don't need to have any exposure to any other perspective on this.
The silos those people live in are just so incredibly well fortified against alternative opinions or what the man or woman in the street might be thinking. Yeah, it's very similar dynamic here as well. Um, the other thing I wanted to ask you about in relation to Minnesota was just the Somali fraud scandal, because every now and then, actually increasingly frequently, American stories break in the UK and across Europe. The Rene Good one did, and in fact, I was furious with the left in Britain because there was a period of time when they were talking more about the killing of Rene Good than they were about the killing of thousands of women in Iran, and I just thought, what you talk about warped moral priorities. Um,
That's the same here, though.
yeah, it's really shocking. But
It's
but the
not shocking, though.
well,
It's
no, yeah,
not shocking for you and I. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
October 7th was the day that I realized feminists are full of shit. They do not care about women at all. And I knew this before even October 7th. And this is probably the infuriating thing about these kinds of stories is that these women, even like Renee Good and probably her lesbian lady, would consider themselves feminists, but they're not. Then why don't you care about the working class girls in the UK and these gang rapes that never were happening? Oh, you probably haven't even heard about them, and if you did, it's a right-wing conspiracy by fascists who don't like immigration. And why didn't you care about any of the women who were murdered by some of the illegal immigrants? You never marched for them. It's so inverted. You don't care about Iran. You didn't care about October 7th, any of the women. In fact, after saying that, like, so much of a whisper the wrong way could get someone Me Too'd, you are all demanding video proof of these women being raped and murdered by people who bragged about raped and murdering them. This has been my bugaboo for like a decade, and it truly is the thing that pushed me out of the left more than anything, was realizing just how colossally full of shit Western feminists are. Sorry, that's my
No, but
rant.
now that you've spoken with such passion on that, let me ask you then about Iran, which I wanted to ask you about anyway. Because you got dead right on that. I mean, I always use this example that during the Me Too scandal, and some bad behavior was exposed during the Me Too scandal, but there was also some ridiculous stories about bad dates and drunken sex and all the rest of it. But one of the stories in the UK, which was on the front pages and it was on the BBC News, was that a Tory politician put his hand on a journalist's knee. And I'm not exaggerating. People could go and Google it. You'll find it out. That was all over the press in a way that the rape gang scandal never was, because they were just so-called white trash girls. Who cares? And in the way that for many feminists, the Iran revolt hasn't been in their minds either,
No.
because, you can't possibly criticize an Islamic regime that might be Islamophobic. So you have found the same thing in the US? I guess there haven't been that many solidarity marches with the
I
Iranian.
was comforted the other day in that I saw one at Yale that happened that was going around. So I think at Yale they were marching to liberate them, which was heartwarming and good to see. I don't know if that's just because there were so many memes going around about the students when Iranian women are trying to free themselves from a theocracy. I mean, literally, it is Handmaid's Tale over there. It is fucking literally. Handmaid's Tale was written about Iran post-70s, and these women don't have shit to say about it. It is infuriating, and this has always been something that's infuriating. Why don't we put, instead of, like, all of this insane stuff where we're now defending men and women's sports and, like, you ascended to the freest place that you can as a woman in Western society, why don't we put that energy into liberating other women throughout the world who don't have a voice like we do? Because it's under a burqa or a niqab. Why don't we help educate the women in Afghanistan and help liberate, like, put that energy into women who are truly living in an actual patriarchy, not a fake one that you made up. And this is part of the fundamental problem, I think, with liberal women, is that they live in a delusional world. Like, they have bought into this idea that they're somehow oppressed, that they live in a patriarchy, that all of these things that have made them somehow victims, while they're truly living the freest version of womanhood possibly ever in the history of humanity. It makes me bonkers. And Iran is one of those things that I've been so vocal about and passionate about. And people are like, "Oh, where were you when it was happening in Syria?" Oh, I was loud about that too. I was furious. And I was furious with the way that Obama handled the situation. I was so upset about what was happening in Syria. I was trying to look into adopting a Syrian kid. You can't, by the way. I did look into it. And I was young. And I was so mad about what happened there. And then again, this is one of my big issues with Trump is being like, "Hey, we're there, we're coming," and they're all out in the streets literally getting gunned down and no one's coming. And that feels like now you've got me on the hook for this because I'm part of America. So I've been very vocal about it, and every time it pops off, I want them to be free so badly because they're truly just oppressed. And then they'll shut down. This is part of the problem with our modern media and just our news cycles in general and our attention spans, which have been shredded by short form content. You have somebody put this much better than me on Twitter too the other day. They were saying Iran shut down their internet and created a blackout, and the media cannot handle a void, and so they just moved on. And it's such a message to all dictators or potential dictators or theocrats or anybody who wants to be in charge that all you really have to do is shut down their ability to communicate with the world and create a media blackout, and then the world will just go, anyways.
That's what's happened. Exactly right. It's a conflation of, the reluctance to criticize an Islamic government, and also the media blackout, and also the double standards of feminism. All those things have
Yeah.
crashed together just to create this horrible ignorance about Iran. The thing that always makes me laugh about the Handmaid's Tale, which is a great book, and it's become incredibly popular recently, that you sometimes get these feminists protesting in the handmaid's outfit from the TV show. And a few people have made this point that a real world version of that kind of outfit exists in Afghanistan with the burqa, or in Saudi Arabia with the niqab. There are women who are forced to dress in a really ridiculous, oppressive way. But you would never ever see Western liberal feminists marching in the burqa to raise awareness about how bad that is. And in fact, you might see them saying is how wonderful the hijab is. Isn't it great that, Muslim women can express their identity? In fact, in the UK, the same time that Iranian women are throwing their hijabs onto open fires and dancing around them because they're glad to get rid of them, girls in schools in the UK are being taught how to put on a hijab so they can feel more empathy with Muslim experience. So the Iran issue, I think, has really captured all of that kind of moral contortionism of, I guess, the contemporary liberal mindset in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a very good way of putting it, and I think the way that they handle it is by just ignoring it.
Yeah.
So you just ignore it. You go, "I don't this isn't, my problem, and I'm gonna go protest for Renee Good because she was killed by a fascist regime," instead of these women who were literally killed in the thousands by a fascist regime, a literal authoritarian government, where it's just like this has always been frustrating to me. It was frustrating to me even when I was liberal, and there were certain things that as I've grown older and there were always places where I kind of bucked against my liberal peers, and one of them was this idea that like the shame they felt for being a world power, for the United States being a world power. And I mean, we are really looking at all of this unfolding as you and I talk with Davos, and it does feel like there was a way the world was in up until 2025 that has been changing. 2026, there are people who understand the world is different now and people who don't. And I always understood that we were allowed all of the freedoms that we have because we are a world power and we don't have bombs raining down upon us. And that is only because we are the current world power. And people just take that for granted. They're like, "Oh, America, we're imperialist, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, so what, you want to be Ukraine right now? Also, another situation that's basically ignored by everybody while they're freezing and have like no power at all and are getting shelled by Russia. That's the situation you would prefer to be in. So you don't feel bad. You live in a fucking like you're delusional. These people have this is what I mean about not having any real existential threats for your entire life. you and not having to fight for your survival existentially as a nation, you get lazy and entitled and delusional, and you think that you can, like, you end up like Renee Good, and no one's freaking marching. I mean, people are kinda marching for her, but not really. No one's, because again, you have people too, the activists, like there is an organized activist class that underpins a lot of these movements, and it is a communist revolution. So there's also that.
I did actually want to ask you about the Europe situation because I think you're right. People take for granted that we live in pretty secure nations, and I think you're absolutely right. The world
I
has
mean,
changed.
not for long, you
Yeah,
guys.
yeah, I know. We're I'm worried about us, but the what Trump has done is, it's useful to hear you reminding Americans that, living in a secure nation involves having a military and being in control of your borders and having a sense of self-protection. Trump has helped to remind European nations of that fact. And one of the things that he's really pushed over the past year or so is that European nations need to contribute more to NATO, needs to go up from 2% to 5% of their budget. They need to look after their own self-defense rather than always relying on America, which I completely agree with. I want Britain to be more of an independent country, more secure, more in control of its military future and its political future. So he's right on all of that, but Europe is bristling against it and basically saying, please still look after us, please fight our wars for us. And it's just not working anymore. But what is the American read on all of this? So, for example, the Greenland question. Whoever thought we'd be talking about Greenland? But what's the man and woman in the street who you bump into? uh, Do they think about Greenland? Is it blowing up there in the way it is here?
Funny thing that we were just talking about on Dumpster Fire. No, Americans are morons, largely. I don't know that most of them could identify Greenland on a map, particularly under a certain age. Like, if I went down to 6th Street, which I should do, and interview everybody about Greenland, it would be hilarious. And Venezuela, same thing. They'd be like, "Oh, I don't know if we should be doing that." It's like, can you even find it on a map? No, I don't think you could. And then you have this kind of, I think the backbone of America, the the people who make America run, the guys who show up and go to work, and they just, they make sure the railroads are like, there's a whole backbone of America that does exist, and they've got families and kids, and they're taking care of their in-laws, and they're everywhere in this country. And they seem to have pretty good instincts, weirdly. Even if it's not like the educated coastal elites and the smartest people, they're very smart in a sense that is much more in tune with common sense and survival. And this was something when I was driving when I first launched Phetasy in 2005, actually, or 2, I think we're coming up on our, oh my gosh, it might be like our 20th birthday from when I first launched my company. I drove around America, and I was in the Midwest and on farms, and I was like, "These are the people who are gonna survive when the shit goes down. It's not gonna be any of these people on the coast and the paper put." And even you saw a very stark, we had 2 major natural disasters in America in 2005. You had started with the fires, and then you had the floods. And now granted, the fires, different situation because everything's burned, it's all toxic, but the government came in, and people in the floods, it was like people showed up with their backhoes from Texas. People, like normal citizens who know how to work heavy machinery, were out there immediately clearing roads, clearing trees, bringing supplies. There was much more of a sense of like Texas survival and community than there was in California. There was sense of community. People, I think Americans in general always rally to help one another. This is one of the good things about our country. But there wasn't this sense of capability. The people in Texas feel very capable. I feel very, they have guns, they know how to hunt. There's still this like old almost prairie Western sense of what built this nation that I feel very strongly in Texas, and I do not feel that on the coast, and this is kinda how I feel about Europe, which has been just slipping into I don't know, it just kind of lost its when you think about what Europe was,
Yeah.
conquering all over the world for hundreds of years, and now just, like, sipping on lattes and don't wanna innovate and don't wanna work, and I saw that there was this really hilarious video that went around a while ago, and it was an American being like, "Europe, you're done. You're just Disneyland for America now." We're like, "We're going to your castles, and we're visiting your getting your, like, good food and your" and I do think there's, France being like, "Well, I guess we're gonna cozy up to China." It's like, well, you're only making Trump's point for him. So now he's saying, "Hey, you need to be more like there are factions in the world. This isn't all gonna be cozy forever." And there are people who are enemies of America, and you're like, "Oh, I guess we'll just let them." I mean, UK, you guys just let them build this massive
Yeah.
embassy next to your secret service.
It's
And
crazy.
by the way, you've just silently let Islamism kind of take conquer the whole place already too.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to be like, "Oh, that's fine."
I so strongly agree about that feeling that there are some communities that just feel capable and others that don't. And even in Europe, we still have communities that feel capable. When I go to the west of Ireland, where my parents are from, people can farm, people know how to milk a cow, they can drive tractors, they can do stuff, they can make things happen. Whereas if you go to certain parts of London, people need a safe space if you say, something about if you misgender them or whatever. So there is that extraordinary contrast in Europe as well. One more question before I let you go. Now, we've talked about this before, um, but I want to get an update from you because we often talk about whether wokeness is on its way out or not. And
No, we've
no, but
said this before.
no, but the thing is, I have moments of optimism because I just feel like, there is reportedly a Gen Z reaction against it. And, Trump is, smacking universities on the wrist for all the crap they've been promoting. And he had those brilliant executive orders saying, get men the hell out of women's sports and women's changing rooms. And Britain is now called Turf Island because we've won so many legal victories for, the right of a woman not to have to undress in front of a man. So there's all that good stuff. But then there is this reaction to Iran when feminists just look the other way, or there is this kind of crazy protesting against ICE, and there is still loads of that stuff bubbling under the surface. So is it one step forward, two steps back? How do you read it?
I think it's gonna be different, and we've been kind of joking because and we didn't get into this at all, but you had kind of the, like, Groypers and all that ridiculous stuff going, viral where they were all, like, in the limo playing Heil Hitler, and we have this kind of ongoing joke on Dumpster Fire, and it's one that I might film where it's like, "Maybe a little woke is good," Like, maybe we need a little bit of it because the reaction as we all predicted even 10 years ago, the reaction was gonna be very strong to this, and now you have these young men coming of age who grew up with all this crap, and they're saying Heil Hitler because they think it's hilarious, and it's based and it's their way of fighting back against all of this political correctness, but I do think that the reaction to that is going to be woke 2.0.
That's scary. And on that on that scary note, Bridget, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks again to PIA VPN for sponsoring this episode. Take control of your digital life and get PIA for 86% off. Click the link in the description below or scan the QR code.